Hey there booktube, welcome back to my channel and welcome to A Closer Book. This is the video where I share a little deeper insight on 3 of my most recent reads, what the book was about, the main characters, the themes, why the book has that title, my rating, and why. First up is Things We Lost in the Fire, stories by Mariana Enriquez. Mariana Enriquez is from Buenos Aires, and these stories are all set in various towns in Argentina. The stories are all dark and haunting and intense, but they describe real-life situations that are also dark and haunting and intense. And I found that even though the stories depicted things in a pretty horrible, gruesome kind of way, that I wasn't as scared as I should have been about the stories themselves, because I know that those are fiction, but I was scared about the reality that they actually describe. The characters in the collection have names that after a while just kind of start running into each other, but the stories will leave a lasting impression on you if you read them. The most impactful story for me was the last one. It was about a woman who was a victim of domestic violence. Her husband had thrown accelerant on her and burned her skin while she was sleeping, and she'd been left tragically disfigured. But instead of kind of like disappearing out of society and becoming a recluse, she went into places where people were clustered together and stuck, pretty much not able to really move away from her, and she forced them to take into account what had happened to her. The resulting effect was that even as people were being repulsed by what she looked like physically, they were also being impacted by the story that she was sharing. Eventually, she became the poster child for fighting back against this domestic violence and repression, and women started to copy her. Women started to mutilate themselves. Women started to burn themselves. An entire subculture formed around women's groups supporting this idea of women burning themselves as a response to this aggression and repression that had been forced on women over the ages. The author wove into the story a comparison of women being accused of being witches and burned as heretics at the stake by the church in the period of the Dark Ages. She made the women burning themselves an act of response. Now, I personally do not condone self-mutilation in any way, for anyone, for any reason. But this story was just so captivating, and it made you think about how women deal with this kind of repression all across the world. In the upcoming months, I'm planning to read the autobiography of Malala Yousafzai, the young girl who was shot in the head by the Taliban because she wanted to go to school, and she eventually went on to become a Nobel Prize laureate. This fictional story just kind of reminded me of that. The fact that on International Women's Day, there was a mass strike where women were saying that they're not going to work because they're forcing the society to recognize the value that women have, and just how much women have been repressed over the years, and the fact that we're not going to allow this anymore. I thought this was such a great opener to that conversation if you want to have it. So Things We Lost in the Fire, stories by Mariana Enriquez. Like I said, this is a dark, intense book. I rated each story. I gave each story, you can see my post-its that I put in the book. I gave each story an individual rating, and at the end I averaged them up, and I came up with a rating somewhere between 3 and 4 stars. But overall, I'm going to say this is about a 4-star read. Some of the stories were just not that great, but a couple of them were incredibly captivating, and I recommend this book. I got this book for free from Hogarth Publishers in order to do a review, and I'm really excited to own it. The title, Things We Lost in the Fire, things they thought that they were taking away from us in the fire, but that we refused to give up. Really incredible, really great story collection. The second book I'm going to talk about is We Need New Names by NoViolet Bulawayo. She's a Zimbabwean writer. She's from Zimbabwe, and this is not her original name. This is her pen name, a pseudonym. She reminds me of Jamaica Kincaid, where she says she had this name and now she's having these experiences that are so different from the name she started off with, from the person that she started off being, so she needs a new name to go along with it. This story is written by a 10-year-old narrator. Her name's Darling, and she is in Zimbabwe. Her family has been displaced because their community land was needed for a mine or something, and so bulldozers came in and just razed their entire community and forced her family as well as all her neighbors into some shanty town where they live in tin huts. The story starts off with Darling and her friends, Bastard and Cheapo and God Knows, and a group of kids that you kind of think of as being like a ragtag band, where they're just involved in lawlessness. They're hungry, they have no food. They go into a neighboring affluent community called Budapest, and they go there daily to climb the neighbors' trees and steal their guavas. And just very interesting look at this life in this rural town with children who are pretty much, they're not bad kids, but they're involved in bad stuff, and they're doing it because they have no choice. The family just doesn't have enough money to feed them, and so this is what they do. The little girl, her friend Chipo, at 10 years old, is pregnant, and for a while she stops speaking. This abuse that has been committed against her, she is unable or unwilling to talk about it. In one of their encounters, we see them meeting up with some missionaries, some aid workers that have come from probably the United States, and they come to visit and they give them packages of things. And in this first person 10-year-old African girl narration, you get to see their response to the aid and to the workers and to the white people and all the people who come in to help, and just how they feel about this. In her narration, she has a unique look, and she's translating almost the intent behind the people who don't respond to the aid workers, the people who take the food but then go off and say things. You get to see their interaction with other people from their community. You get to see people from their social groups who have kind of left and are now working for the white man, who are working for these European or American companies that have come in, and how they view these people as being somewhat traitors to the common African struggle. Eventually, Darling leaves Zimbabwe and moves to America to live with her aunt. So at that point, the focus of the book shifts. We get to see the immigrant experience in America. We get to see the attempts to assimilate and to integrate, as well as a comparison of people who have been living in the United States for several years and who have made no attempt or have just failed at integration. In the beginning, when we met Darling and her friends, and they talk about their dreams to escape their life in Zimbabwe and what America is going to be like, then we get this crashing realization as Darling now has to grapple with that idea that can the dream come true? Does the American dream actually belong to everyone? Does the American dream actually belong to the immigrants? This book is an example of the Bildungsroman genre, which is a novel where you see a character going through their formative years. And again, we meet this narrator as a young girl at 10 years old, and we get to follow her through her life cycles. We get to see her growing up and becoming a young woman, and comparing her life cycle as an African immigrant living in the United States with the people that she grew up with who have remained in Africa or have moved on to other countries. We get to see her moving through those formative years in that way. This was a stunning book. I really enjoyed it. It was a finalist for the Man Booker Prize, and I read it because I'm also doing this challenge where I'm trying to read all the books that were shortlisted for the prize for that year. And when I bought this, I bought it kind of randomly. I saw it in the store and I love the cover, and I'd never seen this book or heard the name before. And something that I didn't realize until when I was looking back at the receipt, I saw that when I picked this one up, you know, at Barnes & Noble, when you purchase from them, at the bottom of the receipt is also a recommendation of other books that you might like, and it says you may also like Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Correct. You may also like Lowland by Jhumpa Lahiri. Also correct. And you may like Harvest by Jim Crace. And that's another book that was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize that year that didn't win. That's the only book so far that I haven't collected. Another book that was on the short list that year was The Testament of Mary by Colm Toybin, which I picked up from the library yesterday. So yes, Barnes & Noble, you were right. I probably would like those books. So thanks for the recommendation. So I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was a wonderful book about the immigrant experience, and I put some post-its in here for things that I just wanted to remember. This blue post-it is where I cried. I got that idea from Books and Lala. In this section, she's talking about the immigrant experience, and she's talking about things that just moved me so much, moved me to tears. I fully recommend it. I don't know, I've never seen anyone else talk about this book before, so if you have a chance to check it out. NoViolet, Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. So this is another country that I read about this year. The last book I'm going to talk about is The Roanoke Girls by Amy Engel. I also got this book for free to do a review, and I don't know how to say it, but I didn't like this book. I wanted to give this book like a 1-star rating. I wanted to give this book 0 stars. Of course, you can't give a book 0 stars. There were things that I could enjoy about the book, so I'm going to focus on that. Here's this wall where portraits of a family are hanging. And you can tell, you know, this family, they're maybe a Caucasian. The old pattern on the wallpaper is hanging, so you assume this is probably an older couple. Old grandma, old grandpa. You can almost smell the apple pie baking in the background. Grandpa coming in from the farm with dirt under his fingers and looking at the pictures of his family, right? You would be wrong. This book is a tale of incest, of lust, of greed, of hate, of abuse. Where do I begin? Where do I stop? So the Roanoke Girls, they look at this Midwestern family who, this is rich oil man Yates, his wife Lillian, and the women who have grown up in their household, their niece, their 2 daughters, and now their 2 granddaughters who are living with them, Lane and Allegra. So we meet them when the girls are 15 and 16 years old, and then there's another alternate timeline, which is when they're in their early 20s and Allegra has gone missing, and grandfather has called Lane to return home to try to figure out what went wrong. And so while the question is supposed to be about what went wrong with Allegra, the question really is what has ever gone right in that household and in the lives of these characters that we're meeting. I tried to find a few things that I liked. I liked that the story was told in flashbacks, and that helped with character development. I like that you got to see each one of the characters kind of become the person that they were, because you were able to see what had happened over a period of time. Instead of just hearing reported speech, you're actually able to see how they became the people that they were. I liked that there were inclusions of stories of all the women whose pictures were on the wall. They each got a little place to tell their story, and I like that. I mean, I felt like it gave a more complete picture, a more complete look at what this family really was about. I thought the cover was very interesting, and I even liked the synopsis when I first heard about it, because I thought it was going to be a different kind of novel. What I didn't like was almost everything else. The plot was vile. I hated the choices. I hated the main character. I didn't find a single character that I could identify with or even root for. Even while we're solving the mystery, we start to wonder, do we even really want to know what happened to the person who's gone missing? Every one of the characters, you could see where they could have been responsible, because they all had some secret that they were trying to hide. This is not a book that I'd recommend to really anyone, because the themes were just so dirty. Like, I didn't find... It was very hard. It was very hard for me to grapple with the situations that were written here, especially given the books that I was reading around the same time. So compare that with Things We Lost in the Fire, which is about women who have been victimized by society or by relationship and are using various means to fight back. And then here we have this family almost of women who have kind of allowed themselves to be victims, but not just that they have allowed themselves to be victims, that they've chosen to be victims. Oh my goodness, I did not like that book. In the end, I gave it a rating between 2 and 3 stars, because the plot was terrible and the characters were just annoying and irritating and repulsive to me. But the writing style, I thought, was okay. So that's The Roanoke Girl. So that is A Closer Book at 3 of my most recent reads. Please leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these titles or if my review made you want to pick them up. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and we'll talk later. So until then, happy reading.